Hi, my name is Shunese, and I'm here with Miss Ty Hollie-Love, and we will be discussing her upcoming book, I Was Four, No One Is Coming to Rescue You, and it'll be released when?
January 31st, 2025.
Coming very soon. Um, well, let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
Ty, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write this book, I Was Four, specifically right now.
And honestly, being in this field for 30 years, 30 plus years, and recent communities that I've joined actually prompted me to go ahead and write the book because it's been 20 years in the making. So I would have to say that my work experience and then the different people, women, men, and children that I've came across that have suffered any type of abuse, me working with them, prompted me to say, you know what, it's time to go ahead and tell the story.
Is this your first time telling a story or the first book you've authored?
It is not the first book I've authored. I have authored another book called Come Over, We Need to Talk. You can find that on Amazon. I have authored about 7 journals. That's a little bit of what I've done.
All right. I'm going to jump right into it. I've had a chance to read most of the book. And, well, for our viewers, let's share what is I Was Four about.
I Was Four is about my experience with sexual and physical abuse, not only from the inside of my home, but from extended family and then people outside of the home. So it talks about my journey of surviving sexual abuse and how I got here, to be able to tell my story.
So I know you said sexual abuse in your home. Can you describe to us a little bit about what in your home was like, I'm assuming, when you were 4?
I'm going to be honest and start this out by saying that I do remember the age of 4 as a child up until the age of like 10, but I don't remember anything before that. So it's not a lot about my childhood that I do remember before the age of 4.
Okay, so who lived in the home with you? Describe your household.
It was my mother, my father, and I have 7 siblings. I have 2 older brothers, and then I have 2 sisters that are younger than myself, and I have 3 brothers that are younger than myself. I am the third oldest.
Are you the oldest girl?
I am the oldest
You're the
girl.
oldest girl.
I have 2 sisters that are inside of the home, and then my father actually had children outside of the home, and I have 2 sisters outside of the home.
Okay. So tell us about your relationship with your mom.
I do not have a relationship with my mother that is cohesive, a mother and a daughter. However, when I see my mom, I am very cordial. I tell her I love her because I do. She's my mother, but that is the extent of the relationship.
Yeah, and I could understand why, because in the book you wrote a letter to your mom, and you stated that she sat by and watched the abuse take place. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we grew up in a household, as I stated, with 10 people. We were less fortunate. We didn't have a lot. And we grew up in a religious background, but it was more so like a mask. So Monday through Saturday, we lived in an abusive household with a tyrant father. And then on Sunday, we were in church, we were smiling, everyone was happy, and we lived a double life.
So when you say she sat around and watched the abuse take place, you're saying that she knew that abuse was this abuse at the hand of her, someone else in the home, family?
Yeah, she sat by and watched it. I don't recall my mother being a person that was authoritative, like disciplined us. It was always my father that did discipline us. And I don't want to get too much into the abuse, but there were times where we would have to stay up all night standing on one leg. with our arms held out. And if we were to drop our arms, we would get a whipping. And this was all of my siblings. And at the time that I can remember, my youngest brother, who I am 10 years older than, was probably the only one that did not have to participate in that because my mom had not been too long had him.
Okay.
And when this was happening, she would be right next door in the bedroom. And it's almost like she just kind of turned the television up.
Just ignored it.
And just ignored the fact that it was happening.
So what was your relationship with like your father?
Oddly enough, I had a really good relationship with my father, as all of my siblings did. Growing up, we all had the same experience because my father, and it is crazy to even have to say this, was more of the nurturer than my mother was.
Outside of the
abuse, absolutely.
I'm just trying to understand that.
I know it sounds crazy. So when I say that, what I'm saying is my mother was not very maternal. She was there, she was present, but she did not have a presence, if that makes sense. Like, we knew that our father was the authority. And so I'll give you an example of, we would be doing something, let's just say playing in the house amongst ourselves, and we would see what time it was, and then we'd get up and scramble and start trying to get things ready in the house because we knew our father was coming home, but our mother could be in the house.
Would you say it was a lack of respect that you all developed for her, or you developed for her then?
No, I wouldn't say that. Not for myself, I wouldn't say that. And I don't think at that age we understood what respect really meant. I think my father just had more of a presence that was authoritative. My mom was a little softer. And so I don't think the fear of my mom, so to speak, was there, but the fear of my father was there.
What about your relationship with your siblings?
I have a great relationship with my siblings. Like I said, out of the 8 of us that grew up in the home, I am most closest with my brother that is a year older than me. So I'm 50, he's 51. And then I am closer with my younger sister, which is 5 years younger than me. But I have a good relationship with all of my siblings. It's not horrible, but I do have a strained relationship with one of my sisters.
Okay, we'll touch on that a little bit later. So, were you all masking the abuse so well that other family members didn't know? Or do you feel like they turned to cheat too?
I don't think we were masking the abuse and that other family members did not know, because they definitely knew. We had cousins that came over and spent the night, so they got whippings as well, like if they were at the home and something was done. So I can't say that we masked and no one else in the family knew, because a lot of them were also living in abusive households.
Oh, so this is generational, you would say?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, since you brought up your cousins, in the book, I know you spoke about being abused by 2 of your male cousins.
Yes.
How did you understand what was happening? And did you say anything to anyone?
There's a story behind it as to how I found out. And around the age of maybe 6 or 7, I had went to my grandmother's house from a neighbor's house. We knew to be my grandmother's friends that lived behind her. And I went over to my grandmother's house from their house.
And when you say grandmother, is this your mom?
This is my dad's mom.
Your dad's mom, okay.
I went over to her house from their house. And something I would do all the time, because they were elderly and we would spend the night over there sometimes and help them out, as well as my grandmother. So that night before, I had been dropped off by my parents to their house. Mm-hmm. We're going to call them the Wilsons. I think they're the Wilsons in the book. And so I'm at the Wilson's house, and so I look out the window and I see my cousins playing in the backyard at my grandmother's house. So this is the Wilson's house, and this is my grandmother's house. You can just walk right up the driveway and into my grandmother's backyard.
Okay.
So I go up to the back door and I get ready to walk in. And as I'm walking in the house, one of my aunts meet me at the door and they say, "You can't come in."
And that's out of the norm.
Just out of the norm. That had never happened before. And I said, "What do you mean I can't come in?" And she's like, "Your mom and dad said you can't come back over here." And so I just kind of turned around, walked off. I was crying. I went back over to the Wilson's house. And I never had this conversation, thought about that situation ever again. And then when I was in my 20s, I had a dream. And the dream was so real that I called my mother on the phone. And I said, "Hey, when I was 6 years old, I remember going over to my grandmother's house and them telling me I couldn't come in. And I had a dream last night that this happened. Did this happen to me?" And she said, "Yes," and hung the phone up in my face.
And what went through your head in that moment?
It was more shock. It was more shock that clearly I had suppressed those memories.
Mm-hmm.
I knew something happened as a child because I couldn't come back over,
Okay.
but I just didn't know what.
So they told you couldn't come back over. I'm assuming, holidays came back around. So Christmas, Thanksgiving, were you not allowed to go over? What happened after that?
I do not remember. I do not ever remember going back to that house. I don't remember. There's a part of my memory that is just not accounted for from the traumatic experience I faced to now. Like, I do not remember.
So, but you would remember if someone came and said something to you about it, to ask you questions or to check on you, see how you were doing. You think you will remember something like that?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why. I had no knowledge that this even happened until I had the dream. I knew something had happened when I was 6 or 7 and I couldn't come back over. But as a child, I'm not thinking that it was any type of sexual abuse. I'm just thinking something happened in the house and you can't come back over.
Mm-hmm.
So I just leave and go back over to the Wilsons and I never hear about this again.
So that's what I was getting at. No one ever said anything like, "Ty, baby, this is why you can't come back over."
No. I have the dream. I call my mother. She tells me yes, based on what I asked her, and then hangs the phone up in my face.
So this was in your 20s. So it's okay to say with 15 to 20 years, it's just been hidden. Like it's never come up.
It's never come up.
Do you feel that anyone in your family was protecting you? Do you think would you say the reason or preventing you from going over ever again was a form of protection?
No. Because just because I didn't go over to my grandmother's house doesn't mean I didn't see these people. I saw them all the time. We had church together. We had family functions where we did go to other aunts and uncles' houses and they were there.
And they never tried to make sure, you don't ever recall making sure y'all were in separate spaces?
I don't recall that space in my life. I just recall as I got a little bit older, like in my teens, they were always around still. Those same family members were always around. So I don't believe that to be.
So the people that were around now, being in the present, do you look at them differently, or how do you view them?
I don't spend any time around them, So I see them when I go home sometimes, maybe in pictures that I may see them in pictures that I post, that people post on Facebook, these family members. I may hear stories about them from other family members, but I myself do not encounter them because I do not live in Atlanta anymore. I do visit, and when I visit, the places that I frequent, they are not there. Like, I'm not going to run into them.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just have to pause and say I'm so sorry that you experienced something like that, and I can only imagine, but I can't begin to imagine what that was like at such a young age when you're trying to develop and establish values and to not only be in the home with abuse, but maybe even using the outlet of, I know my cousins, I enjoyed spending time with them
Mm-hmm.
growing up because it's like, oh, I get a break from mom for a second, and we just get together and have fun. But to obviously, the right type of fun wasn't happening first. And then secondly, now you aren't around your cousins at
Mm-hmm.
all. Did having siblings help, or did you ever feel isolated after that?
I believe that I was isolated prior to that, and it had nothing to do per se with my parents. It's just that when I was 4 years old, I experienced sexual trauma. And so that trauma there, I think, caused me to be isolated because as I began to grow up, I realized that I was an introvert. And so I spent a lot of time just by myself, even with my siblings around me. Even now, as an adult, I do not go out and hang out and stuff with friends. I don't have a lot of friends. I don't surround myself with a lot of people. I'm usually at work or at home. There's really not an in between. I do grocery shopping online. I do a lot of my personal needs, things online, clothing. So I really don't go out because I find that I am very anxious when I'm around a lot of people.
What coping mechanisms did you use or rely on to get through those times, or even presently use?
Therapy. I've been going to therapy now for ever since I've been here in Vegas for like 3 years.
And how old were you when you began therapy, or did your family
46.
support that? Okay, so what were you doing before then in 46 to
I
deal with
was I
that?
was managing. I was waking up every day doing what needed to be done. I did not have therapy. I went from trauma at 4 to trauma at 10 to trauma at 12 to trauma at 15.
All by your cousins?
This is way before I even got to my 20s. And a lot of these stories that I'm speaking of in my book, there were other people that were there that experienced them as well. But I cannot tell their stories because it's not mine to tell. But they were there. And my siblings, the majority of them have no idea that I even gone through these things because I was already out of the home when a lot of them were even growing up.
Okay, so since you are going there, they don't know about the things that you share in the book.
The physical abuse, absolutely, they do know. I have not had the conversation about things I've gone through, except with one of my siblings. I have discussed the book
Okay.
with two of my siblings, but the other sibling that I discussed the book with, we have not discussed any details from the book. We were just discussing that information was coming back to him and that he was just letting me know because we are like the best friends of the family. Like, we are birds of a feather that stick together. So he was just giving me a little inside information
Mm-hmm.
and
Just trying to
yeah, just trying to feel me out. But
uh
I didn't go there with him because he did not specifically ask me a question.
So you never did you have you shared, well, I'm assuming with your therapist you may have shared these things, but outside of that, you were holding on to all of this trauma to yourself? Did it, how did it come out in terms of relationships with others? I know you said you don't really, you stay to yourself, you don't really spend a lot of time physically with your siblings presently. You go to work, you go back home. How has the trauma manifested in other areas of your life?
It's manifested in every area of my life, personally, professionally. Being a parent, having daughters, not being able to protect them because you don't know that something's happening. There's a story in the book, and I'm not going to speak on it because I really need it to be read. I think to this day I have not accepted the betrayal from one of my siblings. And just sitting right here in this moment, it's coming to realization that although I don't hold any malice in my heart, I definitely do not understand how, being a parent, you could keep the type of secret from me that was kept for 8 years and then tell me about the secret when I am going through one of the hardest battles in my life, which is fighting breast cancer. The sting in that is, I think, the thing that I can't get over. Do I love my sister? Absolutely. I love every single one of my family members, including my mother. But I don't understand that. And so until I can understand, I don't know. I don't know how to get past that. Because I don't understand as a mother. How could you do that?
Have you had discussions with her about how you feel?
No, I haven't. Because I feel like it's not my place to build something I didn't break. Am I perfect? No. I'm not a perfect person, and I don't ever claim to be. I expose myself in this book the exact same way I expose everyone else because I am living in my truth.
As you should.
Somewhere I've always lived. And I think that something happened to me about a couple of months ago. And someone came to me and they said, I was talking to a young lady that I do a podcast with. She asked me a question about my father, and I want to get it right. She said, did you grieve your father? Like, did you cry when he passed away? And I said, I cried the day that we were told by his mistress that we needed to get to the hospital right away because something happened to him. When I got to the hospital, we were crying. Me and my sisters, I think both of us collapsed. I was shocked.
Because he was in good health prior to this incident.
He had been diagnosed with congested heart failure back in 1989. But he was fine. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks before he passed away, we talked on the phone. He sounded fine. The night he died, my mother was on the phone with him until he died. So I was shocked. I just was shocked. And so when she asked me, did you cry? I said, yeah, I cried when he first passed away. But after that, I hadn't cried since. I didn't cry at the funeral because the man that I knew to be my father died when I was 10 years old. I had let that image go a long time ago because I knew who my dad was. They probably didn't know who he was. I knew, and my mother knew exactly who my father was. I don't think anybody else knew. I don't. And I don't speak for my other siblings, but I never approached them with anything from this book, never talked to them about it, only one. And I spoke with her years ago. We just have that type of relationship where I can be very comfortable and talk with her. I don't feel judged. I don't judge her. And she's my friend. She's my first friend because she's my sister. But I knew who he was. And it wasn't my place to tell them. I wanted whatever image they remembered my father as when he passed away. That's who I needed them to remember until I was ready to tell my story.
That is a very mature stance to take. You gave me a lot to work with, and I want to go back. Let's go back a little bit to what it was like. I know you said you have daughters. How many daughters do you have?
I have 3.
3 daughters and then 2 boys. I know you said you have 5, so and then 2 boys. Okay. And not being able to protect them and the challenges of just raising girls or children, period, having faced all of the trauma and abuse that you faced as a child. What did that experience look like?
It was a struggle. It was a struggle because children do not care what you are going through. They are carefree. They don't have to worry about anything. And so why would you try to explain to a child what you're going through? So that never made sense. And so from the time that I was a parent, I just did what I got up and needed to do. I was always responsible for them. And so it was a struggle, but I did it, and I never asked for their help.
Would you say you were overprotective of them?
I was. But I was very overprotective of them until they got really... I'm still overprotective now, honestly, but not like I was.
I feel like as a parent, you know, you just... I would say naturally, but your experience with your mother let me know that that's not necessarily the case all the time. It seems like, I know in your book, like, motherhood is not second nature. I thought it was instinctively. You know, even animals, they have the instinct to protect their offsprings. But how did the role of the lack of having a mother, as you would describe, play out with the type of mother you are? Or how would you describe yourself as a mother?
Oh my God, I was a tough mom. I still am. I just never wanted to be the type of mother I had. As long as I didn't turn out to be like her, I was fine. I try to explain to them that, and it's no excuse. If you go from trauma from 4 all the way to 46, them never having been hungry, homeless, needing anything from anybody, with everything that I went through, grace would be nice. It's not an excuse, but grace would be nice because there's no parenting handbook. I'm still being a mom. I'm still looking out. I'm still taking care of 2 of my daughters live with me. I take care of my grandson. And what I have not done is allow that to dictate how I see myself. Because I know who I am and I know what I have done. and I gave them the best that I had to give.
It sounds like you've done a lot of healing work.
Absolutely.
Where or what caused that switch to turn? Like, or did you always have this perspective with navigating the abuse and trauma that you experienced? Or was there someone that was instrumental in helping you get to this transformative part of the healing journey, I would say?
When I had my son, my oldest son, he's 24, and he has autism, I still didn't like men. And I was a mother. And I'm not, upset about admitting that. And when I say I don't like men, I don't mean I didn't like men, I liked women. I'm not saying that either.
Uh-huh.
And I do love women. But what I was saying is I didn't like men. I had not yet met a man that could change my mind about men the way that a man had made me see men. And so I was praying for a son,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could see a man through my son. Because I knew my son would be a man one day. And so I didn't want the trauma that I had experienced to cause me to raise my sons
To be anything like
what I went through. And so I think the type of mother parents altogether, because it's not just my mom, but the type of parents that I had definitely shaped the type of mother I had aspired to be.
I can understand that in its entirety. Would you say it had, or how did the abuse that you faced impact your relationship with men? Did you ever get married? Like,
I did.
What?
I did get married. I married my ex-husband 3 times and divorced him twice.
Okay, so how would you say it impacted your relationship with men?
What I went through did not impact my relationship with men by the time that I got with him, because I had gone through that stuff so long ago. I had forgiven my parents. I had 1 son at the time, and so I had 5 brothers, and I didn't see my brothers how I saw other men because they're familiar to me. So when I had my son, a light bulb just went off. And then I just saw the value in men, and that all men are not the same, because this son has to be a man, and I know he's not like that. So I'm able to see, even though it's my son, I can see it, that all men are not like that. I think that, let me go back a little. So let's put it in perspective of what I saw my mom and my dad go through. I never saw my mom and my dad argue. I never saw them fuss and fight. I never saw them drink. I never saw them curse. I never saw that. I grew up in a 2-parent household until I didn't. My dad passed away when I was 23.
Okay.
So the relationship that I had with my ex-husband had nothing to do with how I grew up. I think it had everything to do with who he is as a person.
Okay.
Now, I would definitely say this. He was familiar to me, just like my father in certain ways. So that is how I tied in the two. And I think that when I met him, I told him that. I said, you have the familiarity of my father.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sending a picture of him to my sister, and her responding to me saying, you don't think that's kind of creepy for you to be dating somebody that looks like your dad?
Oh, so he had mannerisms.
Yes. And so I think that is the thing.
Would you say that it was hard because you were abused by men, was it hard for you to allow him to be around your children? Like, did you struggle with that at all?
No, not at all. One of the things that I had always prayed throughout my life is that my life partner, or the person that I thought to be, like when I meet them, that I know in the presence of them is what it is. And this is not a prayer that I took lightly. I prayed it for a lot of years. I was able to spot red flags when I wasn't in love. When I had not ever loved a person, I could spot a red flag. I could spot it like it's a like tiny zit on your face. I could spot a red flag before I fell in love with somebody. It's like when I fell in love, swoop, you know what I'm saying? And that was my first time really falling in love. And so I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I experienced a love. And so it's the type of love that I was feeling for him that I would have wanted to see between my mother and father, but we didn't see that. I've never even really seen them interact, like a hug, kiss, or anything. Like, I never saw that growing up.
Wow. So I can only imagine that impacts how you receive and give love.
Yes.
What did you struggle with being able to do that with your own children or others?
I'm going to say yes. So the way that affection was introduced to me was not what affection really is. When you look up the word affection, the definition has nothing to do with you putting your hands or touching anyone. And so when you are 4 years old in the middle of the woods and you have a grown man, oh, I'm just being affectionate. I'm just trying to show you some affection. And that's what you're being programmed to hear. When someone that you're in a relationship with uses the word affection, remember, it's a trigger. And now you think that's abuse. I'm battling, are you going to harm me every time I'm in the presence of a man? So when I see something that looks like a red flag, to me, there is no relationship.
What was that healing journey what did that look like for you?
All those things, every time I went through something, I felt like I was given a second chance in life. And so all those things just kind of like opened up my eyes to what I was doing. I was in a marriage for almost 20 years. And for almost 20 years, I carried the weight financially of that marriage. And I can remember after we started dating, us moving to Houston and him saying he was going to quit his job, go up here and start like this little mobile dentistry with a couple of his, college friends or what have you. And I remember standing in the rain one day, a couple of years after we've done all of this. We're just standing in the rain. My car had broke down and we were standing in the rain waiting for it to stop raining. So we walk up the street and pick up my car. I was working 2 jobs. He wasn't working at all. That he was living with one of his friends who he actually moved to Texas with. They left and went and married some girl, and so he wound up having to move in with me. So now I'm taking care of him, all of my children, and I'm the only one working. And this was at least for 2.5 years. We went through a hurricane. That's a whole horror story. You can read about it in the book because I can't even go through it. It's just too much. And at that point, I wasn't the type of girlfriend or wife that would be nagging, or you need to do this. I was not that person. I was not that person to him. I supported everything that he said he wanted me to support. But when you can stand in the rain because you decided to quit your job that you were working at to chase a dream that fell through, and you turn to me and say, you should have told me to get a job, as if though you didn't know as a grown man that you needed one, was an insult to my integrity. And I think that day is when the light bulb went off and my eyes became open. And then I started to realize, this is not the type of person that I really thought that I was with.
And after the 3.5 years, is that when you decided to divorce, or?
When that light bulb went off, I became an attack dog. Every time you do something that looks like a red flag, I'm going to call you out. and he couldn't handle the truth about who he was. And that went on for years. And then I had a baby. And then there were issues with his mother over. That was the biggest issue in the relationship. And through all of that, one day I just woke up. It was August the 5th, 2018.
You remember
I
what day?
remember it. He had went to go work out with his brother. And I called him and I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm at my mother's house. I'm about to get in the shower." I said, "Stay there. Do not come back." That is the day that we separated.
What was the experience like writing this? Like, as all these things are becoming clearer, as you recently, began, well, not recently, but as you began actively working through healing and getting to the other side, did new feelings come up? Was it freeing? Sometimes I know revisiting painful moments can also cause regression. What was your experience like when writing?
It depends on what part of the book that you were speaking of, but definitely when I was writing about the physical and sexual abuse, that was very triggering.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take a therapy session lots of the times when I was going through that. And I can recall this last traumatic experience that I wrote about in the book. My therapist was out of town and I didn't get a chance to have a conversation, so I had to go through that. But when I have an open letter to all of my children that's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very emotional. I have letters from my friends and my siblings that they have written me that are in the book. So depending on what part of the book, I think I had more emotion, and I'm not a person that usually deals in emotion at all. And so this book has opened up that actual part of me. Mm-hmm. Although I was very a romantic person and affection in the respect of like showing love in the things that I did for you, I was not very touchy affectionate, and I was not very emotional. I was not moved emotionally off of every little thing that happened. I just have never been that way, I don't think, because I've been suffering abuse since I was 4.
Right.
As long as I was able to stay grounded like that, I was able to, I feel like, make it through to this point.
You mentioned a lot about forgiveness on the journey. Would you say you've forgiven those that have abused you?
Absolutely.
What about your family? Or more specifically, your sister?
I forgave my sister. I just don't understand. And I think not understanding is what hurts me. Like, I get emotionally every time I think about being a mother and knowing something, and I'm still sending my child to that house, and you know what has already happened. My child could be being abused over and over, and that is the thing that is triggering. I forgave her, but I did not forget. Mm-hmm. And before I started writing this book, I never even thought about it anymore, but it just came about. And eventually I will have a conversation with her if she's willing and open to have that conversation, because I never asked any questions about this situation ever since I've known. Even when I was told, I just never asked a thing. I was just too shocked and angry and stunned, and it was just a lot going on. And I just never, to this day, asked a question about it.
And anger and trying to get understanding, yet still choosing to forgive. What would you tell someone that is on their journey of healing, and that healing involves forgiveness? What is something you would say to them that has helped you navigate and get to that point, to, despite having all these feelings and emotions about the situation and the people involved, you're still able to say you forgive them?
I know it's a cliche, and people say forgiveness is not for others, it's for you. It really is. You kind of like release their power that they have over you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't break it, and I'm not going to build it. I have just gotten to the point in my life where if it does not pour into me, I don't want it to be a part of me. And you just have to release that negative energy because it does eat you up like a cancer. And you get to make the choice every day about how you deal with people. Anybody that you don't want in your life, they don't have to be in your life, and you can still love them. That does not mean you don't love them. It just means I have to love you from the place over here.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I am near you, that love turns toxic. And it's okay for you to break away from that.
Right. Absolutely. That sounds very liberating and freeing. I could feel it. Some people say things, but I truly feel that I can feel it when you speak. It's very strong. And is what made you I know that now you do a lot of advocacy work. What pushed you to step on the other side of fear to now share your story?
I think that the different people that I've met in life, especially people that have gone through some type of illness like cancer, me being a 2-time breast cancer survivor, my nonprofit was started because I wanted to be able to give people something back, like when they're taking chemo. Mm-hmm. Like I took chemo and I would just be sitting there alone because I didn't have anybody to go with me. And there was times that I wanted to journal and talk about how I was feeling, like keep up with appointment dates, because sometimes you lose your memory, you have like brain fog or whatever, you're sick, and you just can't keep up with it. Mm-hmm. And if I had had a journal to document those series in my life, I felt like, that would have been beneficial for me. So when I started my nonprofit organization, I had survivors in mind. I had people with chronic diagnoses in mind. And that was just merely off of me having breast cancer. So that's what did that. My being a sexual abuse advocate was that so I could be able to work with young women and children and just be able to let them know the signs and what to look out for, like grooming, and what's a red mm-hmm. flag, what's a green flag, mm-hmm. If you're not sure about something, if you get that feeling, like don't do it. Allow that discernment that we are naturally built with to speak into you, to speak for you. So I think the reason why I am the way that I am is because how could you not be? How could you not rise above everything that you've gone through and not just be powerful? Mm-hmm. I feel very powerful in my life. I don't feel that I lack anything. I love myself. And I think that is what is most important. And there was a time, the reason why I was even in a lot of these situations that I was in is because I did not love myself. Mm-hmm. And it took me years to get where I am now. But I have arrived. And I know who I am, I know the standards for my life that I have. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what society say. I determine who I am.
Absolutely. With sharing your story, I know it's going to have a lot of positive impact for those that haven't reached that power to share theirs yet. But sharing this and so much of it being personal and things that happen behind closed doors, and has that impacted, your relationship with your family, or how does your family feel about you sharing it? Specifically, your siblings,
In the book, I don't go into grave details about what happened with my children, because that's their story to tell, and mm-hmm. they have asked me not to do so. And so I don't go into grave detail of the things with my kids. So as far as me writing my book, my daughters are absolutely fine with it. And so is my son, that is able to acknowledge how he feels about the process. As it pertains to my siblings, I've only spoken to 2 of them about the book, but out of the other ones, if they want to have a dialogue, if they want to read the book, I'll gladly send them a copy. They can read the book because, as I stated, they wouldn't know any of this. Like, they would be finding out just like you guys are finding out. I have not had these conversations with them because the image of my father that they have is what I wanted them to maintain. It's not my right to take it, but it is my right to tell my truth. There are some of them that they're going to find out that they're married to child molesters. They're going to find out that they are married to rapists. But that also was not my story to tell. They're also going to find out that there were family members in the family that knew this before you married that person. And they were kikiing and kakaing all up in your face. And they still allowed you to do so. They heard the rumors, they heard the stories, and they didn't protect you, nor did they protect their nieces and their nephews. But we were born into a family of incest. And so at this point, I'm not protecting anybody. I'm just telling my story. I apologize. But it's not my story to tell what happened in their lives. I'm just telling my story.
Understood. Now that you've written this, reflecting on it, is there anything you would change if you could go back?
No, not one thing would I change about who I am right now, because that says regret. I don't know how I got here, but there were 2 prayers that I prayed all the time growing up. May you never allow me to worry about things that I have no control over, and will you please allow my mind to be sane. And I was able to raise my kids and make it to where I am right now in life with just those 2 simple sayings every single day. So people may look at you and say that person has no relationship with God, but you don't know a person's relationship with God, the universe, whatever it is that, people serve. You never know someone's walk in life based on what you think about them. Because just because your perception is reality, perception is not reality.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you felt a sense of closure.
Releasing.
Mm-hmm.
Just releasing just that bolt from that last chain. Just that last. Mm-hmm. I felt like, why are you still holding this in? Mm-hmm. You can't say that you've forgiven yourself and still feel some type of shame. And what really are you forgiving yourself for?
Right.
You need to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
That is what is going to free you. And that is what this is about. So closure for me felt like just being free.
If there's one final thought that you would want the listeners and readers to take away, what would that be?
You have to speak up. You cannot be predator protectors. You either in it or you're not. And when you don't speak up, you are complicit.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to speak up. And to anybody that I have offended, in the writing of this book, I implore you to sit down and sit with it and understand that that is what I've had to do for the last 40 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've sat in it. And if it stirs your heart in any type of way, you're going to have to take it to God. It's not on me to carry anymore. It's not my weight.
Mm-hmm.
I just implore people to speak up. Stop protecting what is wrong.
Well, Ty, I think that, or I know that what you have shared in your story will impact a lot of lives. Tell us and remind us where we can purchase the book.
So the book can be purchased on my own publishing website at www.IamTyHollie-Lovebooks.com. I am also going to set it for pre-order November the 24th. It comes out January 31st, 2025. So that is everything that I have going on right now.
Awesome. Well, Ty, I am glad that you have reached this sense of transformative healing, and I know that you sharing your story will only ignite that in others.
Absolutely. I pray it does as well.
Yeah, you may not be able to get through it in all one setting, but it is definitely empowering.
Thank you.